Hey there folks, Rel here. Today we'll be reviewing both C4 and anti-vehicle grenades, even though they don't share a whole lot in common, save that they're both useful against infantry and vehicles. So let's break down the really basic information for both items, then we'll go into more specifics, first on the anti-vehicle grenade and then onto C4. The anti-vehicle grenade is available to the heavy assault class only, and it's going to cost you 100 certs to unlock, so not really a huge investment. And it will also run you 75 infantry resources per grenade, and that's 30 more than your standard frag. Grenade bandoliers will allow you to carry up to 3 grenades at max rank, but normally you just have the 1. C4 is available to every class except for infiltrators and will cost 200 certs and then 500 certs to unlock, 1 and 2 bricks respectively. Now each brick is going to cost you 100 infantry resources per use, which is actually pretty costly if you find yourself strapped for resources. Each class can only carry 2 bricks of C4 maximum, except for engineers with a utility pouch, in which case you can potentially carry 4 bricks depending on the level of the utility pouch. The anti-vehicle grenade is very similar to the standard frag in the way that it operates. It has the same weight as the standard frag, so it's going to bounce and throw the same. It shows off a red flashing grenade indicator, the same as the frag, and it differs a little bit in that it has a 3-second delay before it detonates and will even detonate in the air. It deals less damage to infantry than the standard frag, and it seems to lose its one-hit kill on infantry, and will instead drop them down to around 250 health in that central splash zone. The damage also seems to taper off very quickly outside of that small central area, and the area of effect as a whole is also smaller than the standard frag. But infantry isn't our biggest concern with this grenade, right? We want to know how much damage it can deal to vehicles, and the answer is not a whole lot. I don't have hard numbers on damage, but I can give you a rough estimate of the potential damage to each vehicle. The same as it is with infantry, the damage is going to taper off, so the further away the vehicle is from the explosion, the less damage it's going to take. It does deal decent damage to ESF and heavily armored air targets, but that's not really a major selling point given that it's a grenade and airborne targets are kind of hard to hit. So ESFs will take around 20% damage per grenade and Liberators will take around 15% damage.
Hostile in the air.
In the case of ground vehicles, the damage is based on the angle at which the grenade exploded from in relation to the vehicle. And this is not in relation to where you threw the grenade from or where you're attacking from, like most other weapons operate. So if the grenade explodes behind the vehicle, it's going to deal more damage, and if it explodes in the front or the side, it's obviously going to deal less. For Sunderers, this isn't the case though, as they have the same damage resistances from every angle, unless they're running barricade. So regardless of where the grenade lands, it's going to end up dealing around 18% damage if the grenade hits dead on. Now both Lightnings and main battle tanks will take maybe 10% damage from the front and around 25% of their health when struck from the rear. And Lightnings are actually going to take just a little bit more. Harassers die in about 3 shots, losing roughly 33% health per grenade. And it can kill a flash ATV in a single hit. These damage values are pretty low in themselves, especially when C4 or even a rocket can deal much more damage, but what's worse is that there's currently a bug, I guess, that will lower that damage even more. So if an enemy has Mine Guard equipped, it does not matter which side you are attacking from, the damage of your anti-vehicle grenade will be mitigated by Mine Guard. So if you are running a maximum rank of Mine Guard, you'll be taking maybe at most 5% of your health in damage per grenade. So in itself, the AV grenade does not pose a huge threat to enemy vehicles, which is kind of sad. It does, however, deal amazing damage to max units. If you land a grenade under the feet of a max unit without flak armor, you'll drop them to about 25% of their maximum health. The damage lessens the further away the explosion is from the max unit, but even within 5 to 7 meters, you're still going to lop off around half of their health. As far as real combat goes, the anti-vehicle grenade is a pain to use, mostly because it doesn't stick to vehicles, so it's very difficult to land on moving targets, and by difficult I mean that it's next to impossible. Because even if you do land your grenade, chances are that it's not going to be behind the enemy vehicle, so the damage won't really be that significant, and even less so if the grenade isn't extremely close to the target. So how can we make these things work for us? For one, they're useful for setting up slightly higher burst damage against stationary targets like Sunderers. And by burst damage, I'm kind of referring to if you hit your enemy with a rocket, they're going to say, oh, I should probably move. But if you toss a grenade and then launch a rocket, you're essentially getting some bonus damage out of that first attack. So use them to set up that initial burst. That's definitely the best way, in my eyes, to use them.
You failed yourself.
Exploit armor weakness. If you're up against a main battle tank, you want to toss your grenade to the rear of the target so that you can get the most damage out of it. You can even toss the grenade under a tank, if it's facing you, so that it rolls to the back of the target, or if the enemy is moving. You can also toss your grenade to the front of the target and time the detonation so that they get hit from behind as they pass over it. And don't be afraid to use it on infantry. Remember that you can still rack up infantry kills with the AV grenades if you do see a good opportunity. And if you know a max unit is around the corner, kill it, kill it, kill it. Anti-vehicle grenades deal massive, massive damage to enemy max units, and if there's any real purpose for this grenade, I'd have to say that it's this. Max units see grenades all the time, and yeah, they walk away from them, but they aren't nearly as concerned with a grenade as they are, say, with C4. So you're always going to have that small percentage of people that are just going to soak up what they think is a frag grenade, only to find out that half of their health is now missing. As you can probably tell from the footage, there's not a whole lot you can actually do with the AV grenade, nothing exciting at least. It's simply a supplement to your current arsenal, and quite honestly, I feel like it's lacking in a lot of respects. If the grenades did a flat amount of damage to vehicles regardless of which side they hit, and if they also stuck to enemy vehicles, I think they'd not only be much more useful, but also more unique than the standard frag, because as it stands, the anti-vehicle grenade poses no real threat to enemy vehicles, as their mediocre damage just doesn't make up for the fact that they can easily be avoided. Most importantly though is the opportunity cost for using them. Both frag grenades and concussion grenades will serve a heavy assault class better unless they're relegated strictly to anti-armor duty, and even then, rockets deal more damage and they're an infinite supply while friendly engineers are around, and they're much easier to hit with. Unlike the anti-vehicle grenade, which can be tossed safely from range, C4 is a little more in your face. C4 are bricks of explosives that stick to most surfaces and are detonated by remote. They can't be thrown very far compared to a grenade, but they still do have some distance depending on your facing direction. So face straight ahead if you want to toss them out, and face down if you want to toss them straight down. Keeping this in mind will help you make more precise drops on your target. If you detonate the C4 with that little red button, all of your available sticks will detonate at once. But C4 can also be detonated if it's hit with bullets or explosives, and Flak will also take out C4 that's strapped to airborne vehicles. This includes being detonated by enemy fire, and if you're extremely unlucky, enemies can even knock it out of the air as you're throwing it. Tossing out a brick of C4 will slow down your movement speed, and so will detonating it. This slowdown lasts for about a second, but that's plenty of time for you to get shot in the back, as you won't have your primary weapon available to you. There's also a delay before your bricks can be detonated, and that lasts for about 2 seconds. The number sounds low, but it seems like an eternity when you're in an actual firefight. After the toss animation completes, if you press and hold down that left mouse button, the brick will detonate as soon as it's able, which I feel is actually more reliable than smashing the trigger. The C4 will dissolve on respawn, but not on death, at least not at the moment. So if you drop a couple C4 on an enemy Sunderer and then die before you can press the button, an allied medic can revive you and you'll be able to finish the job. But if you respawn per usual, that C4 is simply going to disappear. Like we mentioned before, C4 sticks to a lot of different things, but what I've been having issues with is sticking it to other players or max units. Now I've heard that it's possible, and I've even done it myself. I've stuck it to an ally's back once before, but it seems to primarily bounce off of them. so I'm wondering what specifically will cause it to stick to people, or if it's just dumb luck all around. That mystery aside, C4 will stick to buildings, terrain, turrets, and vehicles of any kind. In the case of vehicles, if you slap some C4 onto your own vehicle, bailing out of it while it's moving will oftentimes dislodge the C4, causing it to drop onto the ground. Now, I don't know if this is a more recent bug or if it's been implemented to stop turning flash ATVs into improvised rockets, but it's really annoying either way. Unlike anti-vehicle grenades, C4 doesn't base its damage on which side of the vehicle it's attacking. So no matter where I place C4 on a vehicle, it's still going to deal the same amount of damage, with only a few exceptions. One of those exceptions is that if a vehicle has reinforced armor on a specific side, that reinforced side is going to take less damage. And in case you're incredibly curious, Mine Guard does only protect you from mines, well, and evidently anti-vehicle grenades, but it will not specifically protect you from explosives placed underneath you. So if I'm in a tank and I roll over some C4, if the enemy detonates it, it's going to deal the same amount of damage as it normally would have, even if I have Mine Guard.
Banu smiles upon me.
Also, if it's placed on the ground next to a vehicle, it's also going to have the same effect, at least within a certain range, which I believe is around 5 meters. Two bricks of C4 will take out a lightning tank, and even one will drop it to around 15% health. One brick of C4 drops a main battle tank to around 20% health, and two will kill it. Two bricks of C4 will set a Sunderer on fire, so eventually it will burn and die unless it's repaired. If that Sunderer is running barricade armor, it's going to take 4 bricks of C4 from any angle to destroy. One brick of C4 is going to kill a Harasser, unless it has composite armor, in which case it will be severely damaged but still require 2 bricks. One brick will take out an ESF, and as a side note, composite armor for air vehicles will not protect you from C4. 2 bricks of C4 is going to get a Liberator to about a sliver of health, and 3 will obviously kill it. 4 will set a Galaxy on fire in the same way that a Liberator will, and 5 will finally finish it off. Belthazor3457 did a video a while back talking about C4 in relation to hunting air vehicles, and when that review came out, damage from C4 used to be based on how much of the vehicle you actually hit. So tucking the C4 under the armpit, I guess, of a Galaxy or a Liberator would actually cause you to deal more damage. From what I can tell, this is no longer the case, so regardless of where you stick that C4, it's still going to do that same amount of damage. When it comes to killing infantry, C4 does it pretty well. The area of effect on C4 is actually pretty large, but it does taper in effectiveness very quickly past the central splash, which seems to be about 5 meters in range. Anything further than that and you're not going to be killing any infantry. However, you will also kill max units outright if they're within that same 5 meter distance. And even with fully sorted flak armor, you're still going to cut their life in half. And this goes the same for infantry as well, except flak armor is going to keep you from dying even if you're standing right on top of a brick. So those are the specifics of what C4 does. Now let's take a look at what you can do with it. A better question might even be, what can't you do with it? Attaching C4 to various vehicles makes for a really fun time. I personally like sticking it on a flash ATV and just launching it into an enemy tank like a rocket, but enemies will still see you and they're still going to shoot at you, so sometimes you're likely to get blown up even before you make it to your target. But what if enemies could not see you? And I'm going to tell you a strategy that I saw in another video, and I don't remember who made it exactly, but either way, I can't take credit for this idea, not in the slightest, but it is pretty smart. If you have a flash equipped with a Wraith Cloak and a Fury Grenade Launcher, you can do some really nasty things. So slap a couple sticks onto the front of your flash and then swap over to the Infiltrator class. Wraith Cloak is going to make you invisible when sneaking up on an unsuspecting enemy, and you can just use the Fury's splash damage to trigger the C4. So it's really funny, but it's probably going to cause Sony to make mines and C4 dissolve once you switch classes. But for right now, it's definitely a thing. First and foremost, light assaults make the best use of C4. They can fly over unsuspecting targets like Sunderers, groups of infantry, ESFs, you name it. The only target that a light assault cannot kill by themselves with C4 alone are technically Liberators, Galaxies, and Sunderers, And in the case of a Sunderer or Liberator, you can just equip an underbarrel grenade launcher and finish the job if the fire doesn't do it first. Light Assaults also have access to flashbangs and smoke grenades, both of which, coupled with your extreme maneuverability, makes it very easy to drop C4 on top of enemies without them even knowing where it came from. I also run C4 on a couple heavy assault builds, and unlike the light assault, which relies on maneuverability to place well, the heavy assault is going to be able to take a couple more hits and plow his way into a good position. So if you're running concussive grenades, it works very well by helping you close that distance gap. It's also very synergetic with Adrenaline Shield, as you can potentially restore a lot of your shield very, very quickly by wiping out a group of enemy infantry.
Generator stabilized.
On an engineer, especially if you have a utility pouch, you can put a lot of explosives on the field at one time, because they're not going to disappear if you switch classes or even if you unequip C4. The most common use you'll see on the field are C4 bricks just sitting next to anti-tank mines. So even if a Sunderer has Mine Guard equipped, that anti-tank mine is going to set off the C4 brick, which is sitting right next to it. And this means that you're going to deal a lot of damage regardless of which defensive slot you're using. Medics can use C4 as well, and it gives them their only way to fight enemy vehicles, and currently the utility slots are pretty lackluster for the medic class, so it's not uncommon to see medics running C4 over the restoration kit. After all, you already have an AoE heal, so unless it's at a low level, or unless you just really like stacking heal effects, C4 will give you a lot more opportunities. Aside from the medic's natural survivability, there's also the possibility of using healing grenades as a lure to pull your enemies toward your C4 brick. So if you've already dropped a brick of C4 somewhere, then throw a healing grenade on top of it. You can possibly rack up some pretty hilarious kills if it works out right. Regardless of what class you're running C4 on, just remember that flak armor is really going to help you survive your own explosions, because oftentimes it's difficult to trigger C4 before we die, so a lot of the times we'll find ourselves triggering it early. At least I do, but flak armor definitely helps me stay alive. Remember that C4 does deploy very slowly, so you want to toss it in places that you know you'll be safe doing so. As a light assault, that's usually from a treetop or just flying around, and as any other class you can try tossing it into doorways and then standing back to detonate it, or tossing it from a rooftop. Aside from anti-tank mines and Phoenix launchers, C4 poses the biggest threat to enemy Sunderers. And if you want to contribute to your team in a really big way, unlock both sticks of C4 on your light assault. Sunderers remain the biggest game changers in any battle, so if you have the capability, use your C4 to take out an enemy Sunderer. 2 sticks of C4 is more like a fun toy than anything particularly scary, because the game revolves around great deals of burst damage. So if you have only a single brick of C4, that enemy Sunderer is just going to spawn some engineers and heal up. But 2 bricks of C4 is always a force to be reckoned with. Just keep that in mind if you do make a decision to purchase this. Overall, anti-vehicle grenades are useful, but they leave a lot to be desired, especially on a class that already has access to rockets and C4. And C4 is a beast of a utility slot, regardless of what you're looking to use it for. Grenades, of course, are meant to be used at range, whereas C4 forces you to give up that range advantage unless you have superior positioning, but I do not suggest purchasing anti-vehicle grenades unless you're willing to give up frags and the amazingly powerful concussion grenades. Unless you have a specialized role as a tank killer, the detriments just outweigh what you'll be gaining. As for C4, the benefits don't really shine unless you have both bricks unlocked, but in a lot of cases, even that first brick is going to open more doors to you than the medical kit would have. If this video has been interesting or helpful, please feel free to like, subscribe, and tell your friends about the channel. And if you have any awesome stories or videos of you making good use of your C4 or anti-vehicle grenades, just post them as a comment or a video response below. Thanks very much, folks. Rel signing off.